Hello, welcome to AP US History Video 35, Two-Party System Part 2. This is going to be Part 2B to continue the special edition that I've made for my locals.com website because my uploads have to be limited to 30 minutes or less. So let's join our program already in progress. The Second Bank of the United States dies. Remember how I talked about a few minutes ago that Andrew Jackson killed the Second Bank of the United States? He did. It was a huge issue in the Jackson administration. A national bank had been a hot-button issue since Hamilton proposed it in 1791. So the Second Bank of the United States performed well, but Jackson believed it was putting money in the hand of the elite. See the farewell address summary above. Not a summary, a summary. Anyway, Jackson's opponents believed an 1832 vote to recharter the Second Bank of the U.S., which was 4 years ahead of the time that the charter was going to expire in 1836, would cause Jackson to lose popularity and power when he vetoed it because of his opposition to an effective bank. So this was kind of a plan that backfired. So Jackson's opponents said, yeah, let's put this before him, make him look like a real jerk. They were wrong. The voters actually liked Jackson's populist message, which we heard before, basically, this bank is going to have a monopoly on money and it's going to give money to the fat cats and things like that. So they actually liked that message and supported Jackson's veto. Jackson then moved to destroy the bank even before the 1836 end of its charter. Federal funds were moved to banks that Jackson liked, state banks in democratic states, sometimes called pet banks. So, more on the Second Bank of the United States. From Wikipedia, secondly, the Deposit and Distribution Act of 1836 placed federal revenues in various local banks, derisively named pet banks, across the country. Many of these banks were located in the West. The effect of both policies was to transfer specie, remember hard money backed by gold or silver, that's a little note I put in there, anyway, away from the nation's main commercial centers on the East Coast, so not Boston, not New York, not Philadelphia, and not even Washington, D.C., and so with lower monetary reserves in their vaults, major banks and financial institutions on the East Coast had to scale back their loans, which was a major cause of the panic besides the real estate crash. So this was a government policy that had some unintended consequences. I'm sure Jackson didn't want that to happen. Specie circular. Here's another thing that caused effects that Jackson probably didn't want to happen. So Jackson gave notice that only gold and silver specie, or hard currency, not paper currency, would be accepted as payment for government-owned land. So if you want to buy land for the government, well, better have some gold or better have some silver. So this proclamation was called the Specie Circular, and here we can see the Custom House, all bonds must be paid in specie. And then Mechanics Bank, oh, no specie payments made here. So the problem is you couldn't necessarily get specie from the bank that you worked with, but you had to pay in specie, so maybe you just couldn't pay and you couldn't get what you needed. So the problem meant that the federal government couldn't make nearly as much money from land sales as it otherwise would because people who'd want to buy land didn't have the hard currency, they just had paper currency. The destruction of the Second Bank of the U.S. and the Specie Circular caused the economic downturn called the Panic of 1837. What was that Panic of 1837? I'm glad you asked. So, from Wikipedia, the Panic of 1837 was a financial crisis in the United States that touched off a major depression, which lasted until the mid-1840s. Profits, prices, and wages went down, unemployment went up, and pessimism abounded. The panic had both domestic and foreign origins. Speculative lending practices in the West, a sharp decline in cotton prices, a collapsing land bubble, international specie flows, and restrictive lending policies in Britain were all factors. On May 10, 1837, banks in New York City suspended specie payments and would no longer redeem commercial paper in specie at full face value. So, despite a brief recovery in 1838, the recession persisted for approximately 7 years. Banks collapsed, businesses failed, prices declined, and thousands of workers lost their job. From 1837 to 1844, deflation in wages and prices was widespread. So that's a real problem when banks that you've borrowed money from, or really that you've lent money to, rather, if you've bought their commercial paper, the idea is when the bonds mature, when things mature, you want to trade it back in and get your nice hard currency. They say, yeah, we can't do that, or at least we can't give you the full value, even though, yeah, we said we were going to. Well, you know what? Tough cookies can't do it. So here we have a new edition of Macbeth, or the Scottish play, I should say. If you're in the, people in the entertainment industry usually don't say Macbeth; they say the Scottish play. But all right, no credit, huzzah! So that's a way of saying hurrah. Down with the bank. Bear in mind the creature stirred and has some conscience left by the eternal. We must shake that out of him. Never shake the gory locks at me. Thou canst not say I did it. So they're making fun of Jackson, and so repeal the Treasury Order, specie, blah, blah, blah. I am the ghost of commerce. So what they're saying is he basically killed American commerce with this kind of thing. Oh, and you see a thing about Tammany Hall here, so definitely some problems here. And basically a lot of corruption was involved. And so let's move on. You probably know this, but in case you don't, federal aid was not a consideration in the 1830s, so stimulus payments, etc., weren't considered to end the Panic of 1837 and the resulting recession. So no stimulus, no bailout, nothing like that. Not to mention the point of the specie circular was that hard money, money backed by gold, silver, or some other precious commodity, was preferable to fiat currency, money that's backed by nothing but belief the country issuing it will pay its debts. Stimulus or bailout, etc., that's much more of a 20th or 21st century fiat currency economic solution than a 19th century hard money solution. So remember, hard money, gold, silver. Fiat currency, green pieces of paper issued by the US government, or whatever colored pieces of paper issued by whatever government. They can print as many of these as they want. It's just backed by good faith in the government that's issuing it. All right. Whigs and Democrats. Jackson's opponents formed the Whig Party in 1833. There were few clear differences between the two parties. There just weren't that many. Both had Northerners and Southerners, for example, so it wasn't split along regional lines. The main difference was the Whigs supported tariffs for internal improvements, but the Democrats believed that tariffs would, in quotes, fatten merchants at working classes' expense. So basically, that was the main thing. It was very Jacksonian, very common person, common man, working class kind of thing. That, oh, we don't want tariffs for these fat cats. We just want to have, we just want to keep our money as much as we can, and, we'll build the internal improvements we need, but nothing else. Mostly both parties' agenda was to get votes any way possible, which is pretty much the purpose of any political party or any organization at all, if Machiavelli is to be believed, that the primary purpose of any organization is simply to survive. So, that's the way it normally is in the United States. Politics weren't as polarized as in the early years of the US, or as they would be around the Civil War, which would be coming soon, but basically, so they needed to do the same thing as what I showed in my previous video with the John Jackson and Jack Johnson Futurama kind of campaign, is basically both parties are going to support things everybody likes, be against things everybody hates, and then they'll have a few differences on a few issues that people are split on. So that's what they did back then. And so we had the electoral ticket with Henry Clay and Vice President Theodore Frelinghuysen. All right. Hamilton and Clay. So they were very similar about their ideas about how the federal government should operate, as mentioned in video 34, etc. Both supported a central bank, high tariffs to encourage domestic industry and internal improvements. And in case you notice, I made a mistake here. Very similar. Probably should have just taken out these commas, because they're just very similar ideas about the federal government, how the federal government should operate, as mentioned in video 34. So actually just take out this comma. As mentioned in video 34 is still something that you could set off from the rest of the sentence. But I digress. Anyway, both of these guys, Hamilton and Clay, supported a central bank, high tariffs to encourage domestic industry and internal improvements. Modern Republicans are usually pro-business, but do not support tariffs. They're very pro-free trade with other countries and deregulation. They don't like tariffs. They don't like regulations on pretty much anything. They're very big on not raising money for government. They like small government. So raising money for the government is the last thing they want to do. They're very similar to Jackson's Democrats in that regard. Their rhetoric is basically taxes mostly feed the fat cats rather than solving problems. Businesses fix problems using good old market solutions. Whereas more of a Democrat, modern Democrats would be, well, we need to spend money on this to keep our society going, and hey, roads and bridges and schools and things are good things. So that's your difference today, but that was the difference back then, is that mostly Hamilton and Clay supported the central bank, high tariffs, and Jackson and the Democrats hated the idea of a central bank and hated tariffs. So let's move on. Northern versus Southern regional priorities. Now, there was a developing national market economy, but it didn't do away with regional priorities, both political and economic. Obviously, the North was becoming industrialized, and the South was a mass growth of plantation crops, especially cotton. So the South was agricultural, the North was industrial. They had different interests. Even though the regional economies became more interdependent, because if somebody who owned a plantation in the South wanted to buy manufactured goods, they had to buy it from a northern state. Someone in the North needed cotton, perhaps for running a textile mill, they needed to get that from the South. And so the regional economies basically became more interdependent, with greater trade between the North, South, West, East, other parts of this country. Especially with tariffs on things coming from outside the country, they had to rely on things that you could obtain within the country. However, slavery was still a huge moral, economic, and political issue in the United States, and that would lead to trouble later. Remember, we're talking 1830s, 1840s. Civil War started in 1861, so happened pretty quickly. The gag rule regarding slavery. Starting in the 1830s, abolitionists lobbied to have anti-slavery resolutions debated by Congress. John Quincy Adams, who became a congressman after his term as president, so in case you're wondering, is that the same guy who was president? Yes, it is, was a key figure in introducing such resolutions. You don't see that today. People don't go back to being representatives or senators after being president, but whatever. Southern representatives successfully introduced gag rules that were procedural rules that automatically tabled such resolutions, meaning that they couldn't be read or debated. So that was just an auto block. You can think of like a block on Facebook or something. Yeah, we're blocking that. Boop. We're not even going to talk about that. So those gag rules were in effect from 1836 to 1844. So that's 8 years of John Quincy Adams and other people introducing these anti-slavery resolutions, and the Southern senators, representatives, etc., just saying, yeah, we can't talk about that procedural rule. Remember, gag rule, that's too bad. All right. Did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. Why? Well, it's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of view time in a year. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of view time. I also don't have 1,000 subscribers at this time, although I'm getting close, so you could help me by subscribing. Ad money will help me make more videos. And remember, if you saw an ad during this video, please know I did not get any of that ad money. That's what I mean by any of it here in writing. I didn't get any of the ad money, and I won't get any ad money until I have the subscribers and view time that YouTube demands. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put in playlists, etc. I gladly read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos, so go ahead and contact me if you actually have something constructive to say. But I reserve the right to delete comments such as troll posts or spam. So if you're going to troll, you're going to spam, don't even bother. I'll just block the comments, okay? You can hire me for tutoring. If you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, we can meet in person subject to mask requirements and distancing requirements, etc. And of course, if you're anywhere else in the world and have an internet connection, you can do online tutoring with me. And if you don't have an internet connection, how are you managing to watch this video? All right. Thanks for watching. I am going to give you a little more information if you want to stay tuned, though. Contact me, Facebook, Instagram, email, phone. Facebook, www.facebook.com/Linnaball Tutoring. Instagram, it's instagram.com/john.linnaball.tutoring. Phone is 415-623-4251. My email is john@johnlinnaball.com. My website is www.johnlinnaball.com or www.johnlinnaballtutoring.com. They both take you to the same site. Testpreparation.locals.com is my nifty locals.com site. Why not go and join up? lbry.tv, that's another place where you can find these videos. And from what I understand, there's less advertising and a little less BS than some other platforms. Mail. If you want to actually send me postal mail, you can mail me at John Linneball Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. And with that, I'm out of here. Have a nice day, night, whatever time of day it is there. Thanks. Bye.